Are talking about the theory of continental drift. This is a theory that was popularized by this guy right here. He is probably the most famous geologist who ever lived, and his name is Alfred Wegener. It is spelled with a W, but is pronounced with a V. Alfred Wegener is a German fellow. The Earth once had a single landmass. That's his theory, and he named it Pangaea. Pan meaning all, and Gaia or Gaea meaning land. So it's all the land, all the continents that were once in one single landmass, and then they broke apart. They broke into large pieces that we call the continents. They slowly drifted to their present locations. I believe I mentioned in the other video that the speed at which they move is similar to the rate that your fingernails grow, maybe about an inch or two maximum per year. And if you look over here, this is like theoretically what Pangaea used to look like. You can see over here that there's still certain distinct shapes. Like, can you notice any shapes in there? Some of the continents look vastly different than they did before. You could see in this GIF over here, like the full changing of the shapes over a longer period of time. But I don't know about you. I can see the outline right over here of South America right there. And then this, of course, would be the outline of Africa. And then that, of course, makes this North America, which looks very different. And then you can kind of suss out what everything else is, but it's hard to know for sure. So if we're looking at 245 million years ago, this is the height of Pangaea right over here. Some of the earliest dinosaurs are roaming the Earth. Not only do we have Pangaea, but we also had a name for all ocean that was Panthalassa over here. And then, over time, it splits apart into two supercontinents. So a supercontinent is just like multiple continents that are joined together by land. And we call this Laurasia and this Gondwana. And so we have two major pieces. I mean, there's more than that. I don't know why they're not given a name over here, but they will eventually. As you can see, this landmass is actually labeled as India at 65 million years ago. The reason that they're putting that is, of course, this was one of the most significant events that happened in history, which was the dinosaurs going extinct, most likely from a large asteroid impact. We could see over here that it's actually looking like not too crazy different than we have today. We have a distinct shape of Africa and South America. Antarctica looks different, but it is connected to Australia, and India is its own separate continent at this point as it moves up. So then 65 million years ago, you fast forward and you can see what it winds up being today. So if you're going to come up with a big theory, you got to make sure that you have some evidence. And Alfred Wegener did have lots of evidence. He did not present the information the same way that you will see it right here presented, because he didn't have these fancy diagrams that we have today, and he didn't have actual fossil samples that he could show you. He didn't even have like pictures at the time. Everything had to be hand drawn, but he still knew about a lot of this stuff and he presented it. So I'm going to try to go through and show you what he presented. So write this down in your notes. One of his key pieces of information was fossils. There was identical fossils found on separate continents. Now, the reason that this is interesting is because now some of the creatures over here, Mesosaurus, you could say, well, just because we have identical fossils in South America and Africa doesn't mean that the continents had to be connected. I mean, couldn't this just swim across the ocean? Well, that would make sense until you realize and learn that this is a freshwater animal, so it actually wouldn't even be in the ocean. So that doesn't make sense. And then you look at some of these creatures over here, and these creatures are not swimming, hundreds of miles over the ocean. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. We find over time there's certain creatures that exist in Australia that are not found anywhere else. And that makes sense if you realize that they evolved in isolation. But a long time ago, if they were all connected, it actually makes sense why you would find identical fossils on all of these different places, because there's no way for the animals to have crossed over to these other places. Unless you think that there was some kind of like a land bridge that used to connect these two and then somehow it disappeared. I mean, there's no evidence for that. But yeah, that's one theory. Now, one of the fossils that was found is called Glossopteris. Every time I hear Glossopteris, it sounds to me like a dangerous dinosaur or something to be scared of. But it's just a plant. It's an extinct plant fossil. And this plant is, like most plants, they don't just get up and move. They don't fly. So how would it be able to travel across the entire ocean? doesn't really make a lot of sense. Even though Glossopteris is now extinct, it was found on all of these different continents all around the world, which again makes a lot more sense if they were all connected, if they were all at a similar latitude, because then it would be a similar climate. So all of that would make sense in historical speaking. Doesn't really make sense if the continents were always the way that they were today. Here's a picture of the Mesosaurus. Kind of reminds me of a creature at the end of the Jurassic World that jumps up, except for that it's much smaller. So you could see the actual size is much smaller than a human. And then here are some of the other creatures that used to exist that we found on multiple continents that help prove his theory. So fossils were one of his piece of evidence. The next one is simply by looking at the continents, some of them kind of look like they belong together. So I want you to look right now and see if these were puzzle pieces, could you fit them together? Could you rearrange them in a way where they all snap into place together? Did you wind up putting these two together? Because South America and Africa definitely are the continents that look like they have the best fit, especially if you were to drain the water. Like some of this stuff is underwater, but you see that at a much lower depth underneath the water, they fit even better than they do on the outwards edges. And they still look pretty good, like over in this range. So that's just one of his pieces of evidence that they look together. Another one are rock deposits. So when he looked all around the world, he found identical rock formations on different continents. And these rock formations had to happen in a certain way. For example, to find over here coal to form, you have to have decaying plant matter, and then it just keeps building upon itself layer after layer, year after year, until it turns into these coal beds. And you have to have similar conditions, climate conditions, for all of this to take place. And again, it makes sense that they were all lined up in this way. In a band like that, then you would find similar coal formation over here. Similarly, you have the exact same ages of rocks in certain mountain ranges that are separated across the ocean. So another thing is when you look at the rock formations, like look at these layers over here. So what are the odds that you're going to find the exact same type of layer over here? Basalt flows, then some sandstone and shale and coal and glacial till, all in the same order and all the same width. It doesn't really make sense unless they were completely separated. It's almost like a barcode. You know how if you buy an item and scan the barcode, they all kind of look the same to you, but a machine would be able to tell the subtle differences between them. And we can do the same thing where we're saying might look similar, but they shouldn't look identical, but they do on different continents. So you could just see all the different layers of different types of rocks scattered around the many different continents. Next one is mountain chains. I kind of hinted at this before, but certain mountain chains look like they belong together. So here's one example, the Appalachian Mountains. The Appalachian Mountains are pretty close to us. You can get there within about a 30-minute drive. I like to hike in them all the time. And the Eastern Greenland mountain range, so if Greenland fits right into here, so that mountain range will continue, but also in part of northern Africa, they look connected. And then the same thing's happening over here with the bottom part of South America and Africa. These ones look like they match up. So you have like identical mountains in multiple different places with the same types of rocks, same height to them, same types of erosion that took place over a long period of time. As you can see over here, similar types of mountains going all the way down. So that is another piece of evidence. And then here's one, matching glacial grooves. So glacial grooves over here, these lines in the ground are showing the path that ancient glaciers used to go on. They slide in a certain direction, and then they leave little markings behind. So the way that this happens is that you have to imagine back during the Ice Age that there was enormous ice sheets all around the world. And when these ice sheets were sliding down in one way, as it would slide down, the ice as it's sliding, it's almost like smooth sandpaper. But as it slides down, it picks up rocks along the way and it drags those rocks with it. And that turns the smooth sandpaper into like rough sandpaper, really coarse. And then it drags those rocks into it and it causes these deep grooves inside. These are all caused by glacial grooves. You actually don't need to travel very far to find glacial grooves. These are pictures that I took on a hike a couple of years ago in Harriman State Park, which is right next to Bear Mountain. Again, about 20, 30 minutes away. And these are some glacial grooves that you see into the rock right there that I took some pictures of. Now, here's a phenomenon for you. How did these rocks get here? So these are pictures, again, that I took. And if you look at them, you see these gigantic rocks. and they kind of look like they came out of nowhere. If you were to look around, there's no taller mountain nearby where it would have fallen off of and just tumbled down to it. Sometimes they look totally different than the surrounding rock, too. They may not even be the exact same type of rock. So, where could they have come from? I'll let you think about that for a second. The answer is that these rocks are called glacial erratics. So an erratic means kind of like random or strange that it would be there, and glacial means it came from a glacier. So these came from a glacier really long time ago, and they were dropped off in these areas over here. So these, I didn't take any of these photos, but these are, again, they just, anytime you see a random gigantic boulder in a place where it doesn't seem like it would have naturally fallen down from something, most likely ancient glaciers brought it there. This one's pretty famous, though. You can see this in Acadia National Park near Maine. When I was there, a whole bunch of people were lining up to take a photo as if they were getting crushed underneath the rock. But I didn't have enough time to take a photo like that, so I didn't do it. So anyway, you could see here is the picture of a glacier right there. I took this photo when I went to Iceland, and this glacier is gradually sliding down this way, and it's eroding, right? It's dragging stuff with it as it comes down over here, and then the chunks of ice wind up floating over here and become icebergs. So I actually got to go on a tour there recently. That was me and my wife as we went down over there. There is the glacier. We got pretty close to it, or as close as they said was safe, because sometimes chunks of it fall off and then cause a huge wave, and you have to literally speed away from it. But that's me holding like 100,000-year-old ice. It never melted before, but it started to melt in my hands, which was really cool. Anyway, it brings us back to where do these glacial erratics come from? So back in 25,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, there were glaciers right around where we are today. And they would come down the mountain over here. As they went down, parts of the boulder would get into the ice. The ice would drag it forward. But then what would happen is that over time, the glacier would either retreat out or it would just get dropped off and the ice would keep on going. And then it drops off this random glacier, this random rock that was part of something else that moved over a long way. So that's just another piece of evidence that I had over there. So these were all the different pieces of evidence. And I want you to think about this right now. Do you think that Alfred Wegener's theory of continental drift was accepted? And I want you to think, was it yes or was it no? And why was this the case? Do you think that they believed him at the time? So the time period over here was, let's say, the early 1910s, maybe like 1914 range. Somewhere around there is when he first presented these ideas. And let's go over the piece of evidence. He had glacial grooves, similar, identical markings on different continents. He had mountain chains. He had rock deposits that matched. The continents fit together. And lastly, identical fossils. Was that enough to convince everyone? The answer is that no, it was not accepted. And the reason that it was not accepted is because, as compelling as the evidence was, he couldn't explain what would be a force that could move continents away from each other. What was a strong enough force to cause this to happen over hundreds of millions of years? And this is where Alfred Wegener just couldn't get past that. He didn't really understand the mechanism that could do it. He didn't have the smoking gun, so to speak, to put the nail in the coffin and all those phrases to really convince everyone. And because of that, his theory was not accepted. And he kind of became a laughingstock of the field, unfortunately. Now, he was later vindicated in the sense where he's now the most famous geologist, and anyone who studies geology knows about Alfred Wegener, and his name is in the record books. So he wound up ultimately being right about his theory, but they didn't believe him. So what is this force that moved the continents? We'll find that out later.